Honestly, it just sucks to feel behind. And I've felt that way more times than I can count. And it's never just one feeling, is it? It's a whole host of feelings. Anger, frustration, regret, especially when you see other people just cruising through life. You know, those ones that seem to do everything at the right time. The right school, the right job, the right partner, the right house. It's like they followed some checklist and everything just sort of worked out for them. And then you go looking for answers, right? In podcasts and books and maybe even videos like this. And they all say exactly the same thing. Start small, be consistent, let it compound. Which makes it even more frustrating because it's true and it just reminds you of why you're behind in the first place, because you didn't start early and you didn't compound anything. So it begs the question, is it too late? Are you now out of the game? Well, it doesn't mean that, and let me tell you a quick story to explain why. I started investing 20 years ago when I was at university. I got obsessed with it. I studied all the mathematical charts, I researched all about behavioral psychology of crowds, and I read every interview and book I could get my hands on. But one day I came across this book called Market Wizards by a guy called Jack Schwager. The book is basically just a bunch of interviews with high-profile investors from the 70s and 80s. And one thing stood out to me from this book, that ultimately there was two paths to success. One was through small, consistent effort, right? The compounding, the thing everyone talks about. But the other was through asymmetric moves, big moves that pay off big, fast. See, some of these investors made small, consistent bets over maybe 40 years, and they built some of the biggest funds the world has ever seen. But then there was other investors, and these guys looked for disproportionate trades that grew their capital exponentially over a short period of time. This book taught me that both ways were valid. Both are non-linear and both are grounded in mathematics. Either you do it through compounding or you do it through asymmetry. I took this lesson through life. I use it in my career, my finances, my relationships. It's really saved me more times than I can count. The thing is, and maybe this is the same for you too, but I've never really fallen behind because I'm lazy. I've fallen behind because at times I've optimized for other things like meaning, freedom, or maybe even creativity. And everyone who seems to have it figured out, who've checked boxes early, they seem to have taken the safe route, right? They've taken the secure job over the risky idea, or the predictable path over the meaningful one. And that's fine. Safety is not a bad goal. It's just for some of us, safety is not enough. We want meaning, we want growth, we want a life where something more is possible. And so that's why we fall behind, not because we've failed, but because we've optimized for something else. And here's the good news, you're not punished forever, right? You're not punished forever for choosing meaning over security or freedom over safety. There is a way back, and that way back is grounded in mathematics. So if you're behind, right, the first path, small, consistent actions over decades, is basically closed to you. You can't go back and be 18 again. You don't have 30 years to build slow momentum. But there is another path. This path is the asymmetric path. Bold, high leverage moves that change everything quickly. This path is wide open to you. And here's the key. It's just as real, it's just as effective. In fact, most outside results in life come from asymmetric dynamics, where a small input, the right person, the right bet, the right decision creates disproportionate outcomes. So if you're tired of being behind, stop waiting, stop trying to compound things that aren't even working. Start looking for leverage in your bank account, your skills, your time, your network, wherever you can get it. Because when compounding is off the table, then leverage is the only strategy that makes sense. Being behind is your biggest advantage because it forces you to stop betting small and start betting big. Here's a good way to think about it, right? So like compounding is like taking the stairs, one step after another, slowly moving upwards. It works, it's steady. But sometimes you just don't have time for the stairs, right? You use the elevator. Asymmetry is the elevator. It skips steps. Sometimes it's hidden, but when you take it, you move much faster because it uses leverage, not effort. Here's a somewhat recent example of this, right? So because I had an early interest in behavioral psychology and behavioral finance, I sort of built a reasonably successful career in industry. But I always wanted two careers, one in industry and one in academia. See, I always thought before I turned 35, I'd be a university lecturer on the side. This was a dream of mine. So I studied during my 20s. I sort of thought I'd aim to do a PhD. But the truth is, at every stage, I just didn't put in enough work. I was more focused on my career and travel at the time, and it just didn't work out. So 35 came and went, and lo and behold, I was still not a university professor. Also, I'm always someone who sets goals and has deadlines, so I really did feel behind. It wasn't lost on me that now that I'm 35, that even if I start now, it will take me 10 years to get there. I wasn't behind by weeks or months, I was behind by a decade. So a year later, when I was 36, I knew I was short on time. I knew I couldn't afford to wait any longer. So I came up with the only asymmetric decision or bet that I could come up with. Now, there was no guarantee. I knew that it wouldn't necessarily work out, but I was looking for something that had leverage, something that if it worked, I would hit my dream, and if it didn't, it wouldn't destroy me. So the idea was, and as simple as this sounds, was that maybe I could find a role without a PhD by just leveraging my network and my experience. So through my network, I sent DMs and emails and joined groups. I thought the downside here would be the amount of time or a bit of embarrassment from sending the DMs and emails if it didn't go well. But if it did go well, it'd be a life dream that I would accomplish. So it made sense to me, and that's what I did. And it wasn't that long that actually one DM changed absolutely everything. Through my network, I got in touch with an academic dean at a university I was looking at. I sent him a DM, he called me for interview, and I got the position. The pain of feeling behind where I should be in life drove me to come up with the only asymmetric bet I could make that could change everything quickly. And now for the last 6 years, I've got to live my dream of holding 2 university positions in finance and economics. This one asymmetric move basically saved me 10 years of my life. But honestly, this is just one example where I've used this in life. I've used this in relationships, in finance, in career. Sometimes it's my network, sometimes it's my money, sometimes it's my mindset, sometimes it's my skills. Whenever you start looking for asymmetry in life, you see it everywhere. So look, if this resonates with you and if you think it can help, then this is the basic criteria I use to find asymmetry when I'm behind. Here it is. Look for a decision, a skill, a strategy, a person, anything at all that has limited downside, which basically means if it doesn't work, you can recover very easily, with unlimited upside, which basically means if it works, it changes your trajectory completely, and is non-linear, which means it doesn't have to work every time, it just has to happen once. Limited downside, unlimited upside, non-linear. Here's a very simple example that will make it clear. Investing is an asymmetric bet. Why? So first of all, it has limited downside. You can only lose the amount of money that you've invested. So if you've invested $100 or $1,000, then you can only lose that amount. Second, it has unlimited upside, right? There's no limit to how high the price can go. And then finally, it's non-linear. You don't need a lot of stocks to work out in order to make a transformative difference in your life. You just need a few. In fact, Warren Buffett's ridiculous wealth comes from just 4 stocks alone. And it's not just investing, it applies everywhere. So it could be a skill that you develop that scales well beyond your job. It could be a person that you meet that just completely transforms your network. Or it could be a mindset that you change that multiplies your income. We can actually boil it down to one question that you can ask yourself. And here it is. What's something I can change or do that feels bold, but that has limited downside and unlimited upside? The more you ask yourself this question, the more you'll realize that it's perfectly fine to be behind, right? It's okay. In fact, it might even be your advantage, because being behind just means that you're on a non-linear journey. And on non-linear journeys, there are non-linear paths to success. You'll realize that you're not behind because you're broken. You'll realize you're behind because you just focused on something else. But now that you're here, leverage is the only path forward. You don't need more time. It's not too late. You just need one asymmetric move, and being behind might be the very thing that forces you to find it.